Get your ears wrapped around the Golden State Media Concepts Basketball Podcast. All the scoop you need to know, from college basketball to the NBA and even March Madness. News of your rising stars, topics on and off the hardwood. This is the Golden State Media Concepts Basketball Podcast.
Welcome into the GSMC Basketball Podcast, right here at the GSMC Podcast Network. It is your host back again to talk about all things basketball with you in the association, college and professional. Brice Lewis. Going into it, have actually a jam-packed show for you today. A lot of stuff has happened since the NBA Finals ended and last weekend, and so we have to get all that down to you guys on the podcast, talk to you all about it, discuss with you everything that's going on. So we hope stay tuned for the entire show, listen to everything that's happening in the league, give my opinion on it and everything of that sort. On today's show, we're going to talk about the total rebuild in Houston. We're going to talk about rumors from the Knicks. We're going to talk about who might be a surprise favorite for Giannis if he does reach free agency next year or potentially become traded. A team that we've been rumored to hear who's all in on him. Plus certain players opting out. Certain teams are eyeing certain players from the Lakers. All of that here on the podcast. And obviously have to give coaching news as also. We have more coaching news, breaking news as well. So we have all that to get to on the show during this podcast. So thank you for tuning in, listening, giving me a solid hour of your day to talk about basketball, the sport that we love. Because obviously, we wouldn't be listening to this podcast right now if you didn't love the game of basketball. So, one thing we have to look at here is that if you think about it, if you really think about this, the Houston Rockets right now are going through a total rebuild because Daryl Morey, general manager, a man who has made daring trades, doing anything possible to surround James Harden with talent and get this team in championship position. He is a guy who has been, some people considered a mastermind in terms of all the dealings and wheeling and everything. The formulated changes, him creating the small ball, him doing all these different types of things, doing that fast-paced analytic offense with threes and layups and no mid-range. Daryl Morey, obviously Mike D'Antoni had a big part to play in that as well, but, he approved it, obviously, and he got the players to fit that type of system. But Daryl Morey has now officially stepped down in a mutual agreement with the Houston Rockets to step down. He will just now be in an advisory role with Houston, so he will still be within the Houston organization. But he will no longer be the general manager, also helping still to find the next head coach of the Houston Rockets. And now this leaves a big hole at GM. So now Houston has to now replace not only their head coach, but their general manager. And so now this makes a lot of rumors about, okay, so we already knew with Mike D'Antoni leaving, if Daryl Morey stayed, we'll think, okay, they just need a head coach. They're probably going to try to win with what they have and maybe try to make maybe one or two changes there and then maybe try to see what happens. Or maybe try to make another big splash because, Daryl Morey was the type of guy to do that. Now that he's out of the building, now Houston now has to find them a GM and a head coach. And so could that potentially even mean that a guy who is interviewing for the head coaching job is also interviewing for the general manager job for the Houston Rockets? These are all questions. And I think that's going to be very interesting to see how this process plays out. Because obviously them, in disappointing fashion, losing in 5 games to the Lakers, and the worst thing about it was the way they lost, especially the last 2 games of that series. Must-win games, and the Rockets just came out absolutely flat, lifeless. The flaws of the team were truly exposed. And now it was clear changes needed to be made. You were hearing questions. Would a rebuilding process start in Houston because of what would happen? That was a question. What would they try to rebuild? Because basically, your team has tried these different combinations, different lineups, different types of play, and have not been able to get over the hump. Only thing you could ever say in their entire history was the what if against Golden State if Chris Paul didn't go down. That would be the only other time where you may sit here and say, well, they might have been able that year to make it to the finals, and then we don't know what would have happened against LeBron James and the Cavs in that particular finals. And so, obviously that happened, and then just never being able to replicate that same success, it just looks bad. And Houston has had a history of bad playoff exits. Obviously, you remember years ago against the Spurs, James Harden just completely unexpectedly playing one of his worst games of his career in an elimination game. He did not look like the same James Harden. That's where you got all the questions about his endurance, his physical shape. Was he tired? Things of that nature. Obviously, we know, like I said, the Golden State Warriors being up 3-2. Game 7, missing 22 consecutive threes. We know the next year against Golden State. Got the series back to 2-2 and lost the next 2. We know this year. Lost in 5 games, was blown out in the last 2. Houston just does not finish series well. And that also adds on to the pressure that is felt by James Harden, by the entire organization, by everything that is happening. And so, the question is here. With the Rockets, what is the next step? Well, remember the last episode. I don't know if y'all remember what I said last episode. I said that obviously with a new regime now officially coming in with GM and head coach, they're not going to do small ball good. So they're going to need some big men. They're going to need big men. They have none. They have to get some. And they have a lot of guards and forwards. So they may be able to package some of them to get a quality big guy. And I said Russell Westbrook might be a piece in that trade, because you're more likely to be able to get a quality big man if you include Russell Westbrook. The question is, does the team that you're trying to acquire this big man from want Russell Westbrook? That's going to be the question. And now there is someone from the Houston Rockets and Philadelphia 76ers. Actually, I believe this person is from the Philadelphia 76ers and covers all the rumors. Just reported, and multiple platforms are now starting to report, that the Houston Rockets are interested in trading for Joel Embiid from the Philadelphia 76ers. And I don't know if y'all remember, I believe a few weeks ago I had mentioned if the 76ers were to move off Embiid, the Rockets would be a team to look out for because they need a big man. And trust me, they're probably looking to get a star big man because Mike D'Antoni isn't there anymore. Because remember, I told you, if Mike D'Antoni went to the 76ers, it wouldn't make sense if Embiid's there because Embiid can't run that system. He can't do that up and down system. We question if he's even in shape to do a regular half-court offense. So he definitely can't do a Mike D'Antoni system. So, if you think about that, and you really put it together here, you have to look at this. If you trade Joel Embiid to the Rockets, you could probably get you Russell Westbrook. You might be able to get a PJ Tucker in there, maybe a Robert Covington, maybe an Eric Gordon, maybe 2 out of the 3, I would think. The Houston Rockets have basically said also in these reports that everybody on the team is available but James Harden. So Russ, Eric, PJ, Covington, Austin Rivers, all of them are available to be taken. And what do the Sixers need? If you trade Joel Embiid, what is Ben Simmons' strength? His passing ability. What do the 76ers lack at? Shooting. You are trading Embiid away to one of the best shooting teams in the league because all they have is shooters. And then they could bring in an Eric Gordon and a Robert Covington and maybe even a Daniel House or Ben McLemore. And now you've added 2 shooters, and we know Eric Gordon. Eric Gordon can ball. You give yourself a scorer in Eric Gordon. We know Covington can hit the 3. He's a great 3-and-D guy. Now you've just added 2 guys for Embiid to be able to give the ball to. And now you can run a more fast-paced up-and-down offense. So if Doc Rivers wanted to run that type of offense in Philadelphia, he could do that. I think that would be a great deal on both sides, because what do the 76ers need? They need shooters. What do the Rockets have? Shooters. What do the Rockets need? A star big man. What do the 76ers have? A star big man. I feel like that's the best trade they probably could get this entire offseason for either team. If the 76ers really want to move off Embiid, that would probably be the best trade you can get, unless somebody gives up an elite shooter. Or free agency comes and maybe they're able to sign a couple of them. But I think that would be a good deal on both sides. And I'm sure without a GM or without a head coach, I'm guessing the basketball operations guy would be basically leading that trade if that trade was to happen. But it's definitely something that I think they have to keep an eye on. Because if they're going to run more of a half-court offense, whoever comes in as the new Houston head coach, you do get a Joel Embiid. You have a James Harden. You got a guy in the perimeter who can, flat out score. But then you have a guy where Embiid can just be in the point and dominate. Somebody who can get the offensive boards, block shots. So many of the reasons why Houston struggled these last few years they now have. They had Clint Capella, but the difference between Clint Capella and Joel Embiid is Joel Embiid can drop 30 a game. Clint Capella was mainly an alley hoops, rebound, block shots guy. Embiid can do all that. Plus give you 30. He could be the offense working. If James just said, hey, we have a mismatch in the paint, James seems like he's willing with his basketball IQ, because a lot of people underestimate James Harden's IQ. He's going to say, we're going to go into Embiid, and we're going to dominate in the paint. And then obviously they're going to have to collapse on Embiid, which is going to open me up at the three-point line. And we do also underestimate Joel Embiid's passing ability. So I think that this looks great for Houston if they do make this trade. And like I said, with Jel Morey stepping down and them still needing a new head coach, there's going to be this Houston team will not be the same look Houston team that we saw this year, even from previous years. I say there's a very strong possibility you may not even see Russell Westbrook on Houston next year. Because one thing that you saw in that playoff series against the Lakers is the Lakers exposed something that we've all knew. Westbrook can't shoot. And so they were like, Westbrook, take your threes. We will trap Harden and we will guard everybody else. If there's one person we will allow to leave wide open, it will be Russell Westbrook, because we do not believe he can beat us consistently with the J. So we're trapping your best scorer. We're still D'ing up your other shooters. And then the only person who can score is a guy who has to get to the paint, which obviously you can come help on that and then cover that. And so Houston has a lot of decisions that have to be made this offseason. I'm sure they're going to look at everything, and they're going to evaluate every option, every obstacle. And I'm sure whoever they bring in as head coach, I believe this cold-heartedly, they're going to discuss what would be your plan. What would be your plan? How would you work with the general manager? Because that's exactly what we're going to ask general managers they interview. What would be your plan? How would you improve this team? And then if they feel like maybe if they want to do a head coach that's both a GM or a head coach, or a separate GM and a separate head coach, I'm sure they're going to be looking for people who can have similar visions on how they want to build this team. And if the people in the front, the owner, the head of basketball operations agrees and likes the direction of where they want to take the team, then you'll see him get hired and you'll see what happens. So this is going to be very interesting. Houston has now become one of the most interesting offseason storylines of this basically just started offseason, even though it's not the official new league year of this newly ended season. They are probably the hottest storyline in all of the NBA. But that's all the time we have here for this segment. Coming up next, we're going to get into some new stuff. We're going to talk about new head coach of the Clippers as they finally acquired the guy. The Mavs are also looking to acquire a third star player. And AD expected to be back with the Lakers. All that here and more on the podcast. Football, basketball, and baseball are all back, and that means it's time to get down your bets. This is Brice Lewis here to tell you about my favorite sports book, and that's BetUS. I only endorse one sports book, and that's BetUS.com. Why you ask? BetUS is the pioneer in online betting with more than 25 years in the biz. You need a sports book with integrity and longevity, and you need to know that you're going to get paid. live betting, MMA, golf, horses, esports, entertainment, and all kinds of crazy prop bets and futures. They have it all. Nobody in the industry gives bigger bonuses than BetUS. Go to betus.com now and fill out your information. It only takes a minute. When you get to How Did You Hear About Us box, type in GSMC and you can get up to 150% in bonuses on your first deposit. Nobody beats that. I bet at BetUS, and so should you. Join BetUS today, and don't forget to type in GSMC and get up to 150% bonus on your first deposit. That's BetUS.com, America's favorite sportsbook.
Are you looking for the very best NFL and college football podcast? Then check out the GSMC Football Podcast. Get the latest football news both on and off the field. From the NFL Draft to trades to the rumor mill to the NFL Combines, they got you covered. That's GSMCpodcast.com/football-podcast. Get updates on college rivalries, game day insights, and much, much more. It's football talk the way you want it. This show eats, sleeps, and breathes football. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
Welcome back to the GSMC Basketball Podcast. Last segment we discussed Daryl Morey stepping down as the Rockets general manager, now officially basically embracing a full rebuild in Houston. And also reported that the Houston Rockets have Embiid for trading for All-Star Joel Embiid, and that everybody on the roster is touchable but James Harden. So I said that that would be a perfect partnership between two teams who have two needs. 76ers need shooting, Houston has shooting. Houston needs a star big man, 76ers have a star big man. It makes itself to me, the deal makes itself. Now the question is, from 76ers, which shooters do you want? Do you want Gordon, Covington, PJ? Do you want PJ, House, Russ? I mean, you would think for the most part, honestly, the Houston Rockets probably want to put Russell in there somehow. That's the thing. He's not a shooter, so it's kind of like they may have to give up literally Russell, Eric, Covington, and then maybe throw like a House or a Macklemore in there for Embiid. They might legitimately have to do it that way. Because, I mean, honestly, you may feel like if we're going to take on Russell Westbrook, you got to give us your best shooters. And so that's something I think that definitely could happen. But now we're going to get into some other news. And the Clippers, breaking news, have officially found or promoted their new head coach, and this was reported and expected for weeks. Ty Lue is the new official head coach of the Los Angeles Clippers. And like I said, this was a very expected decision to be made. People have been saying for weeks Ty Lue was always the front runner. They gave other guys a chance. There were some guys that they were kind of liking. There was even a report that Mike Brown made an impression, former Cavaliers and Lakers head coach. But they eventually said, nope, we're sticking with Ty Lue. And one thing about it is, that's very interesting to me. Chauncey Billups. We heard about Chauncey Billups earlier this year, potentially maybe even trying to pursue a front office job or a head coaching job. He will now be the lead assistant on Ty Lue's staff. So bringing in another accomplished team player like Chauncey Billups to work with Kawhi and Paul George, I think that's a great decision, a great first coaching hire for Ty Lue. And now, really, the Clippers are running it back with basically, for the most part, the same staff, maybe with a couple of additions and maybe a subtraction here and there. But basically the same staff, and then we'll see what Ty Lue's vision and direction of this team is. Because now Ty Lue is tasked with the same pressure that Doc Rivers was under. Steve Ballmer believes they have a championship-ready team. So, you need to get to the championship. You can't be losing the second round to the Denver Nuggets blowing a 3-1 lead. See, it's one thing if it was a competitive series throughout, back and forth. But the fact they lost a 3-1 lead, leading by double digits in all 3 games to the Denver Nuggets, I just feel like that was just such a choke job, a collapse. It was just, I felt like Steve Ballmer he just couldn't do it. And then, like people have said, and what I even agree with, when he talks to Kawhi and Paul George, they clearly might have probably not said we need to keep Doc at all costs. Because remember, they could be free agents after this year. There ain't no way Steve Ballmer is letting Doc Rivers go if he knows it's against the best interests of his 2 best players who could leave. So that's why I think the perception is that the Clippers may have wanted Doc Rivers out. They may have said, listen, Doc's fine and everything. We still respect Doc. But we don't think it's going to work with him being the head coach. And also to re-up on the deal, Ty Lue also gets a 5-year deal with the Clippers. So he has long-term security. And I think one thing we don't think about is I think Ballmer, and I could be going out on a limb here, if in case they can't keep Kawhi Leonard and Paul George, you wouldn't give Ty Lue a 5-year deal. This to me feels like a deal that, listen, we have championship expectations, right? But let's say somehow we don't reach expectations. Let's say we have a better season than we had this year, but we still don't reach championship expectations and win the championship. Let's say we lose in the finals. And let's still say Paul George and Kawhi Leonard agreed to move on. I feel like Steve Ballmer made this decision because he believes that Ty Lue could help ease that pain. He could help keep this team competitive, even if that were to happen. Because if you were on those types of expectations, championship or bust, and you know you may only have your stars for only 1 more year, and then the new head coach gets 5, that sounds like he also looks at this like, hey, just in case we don't lose him, we still have security, we still have consistency at our head coaching spot, and we believe Ty Lue has a plan to keep us competitive and potentially maybe even get back into the play. Because remember, 2021, when Kawhi Leonard and Paul George potentially become free agents, you're still going to have Giannis if he doesn't re-sign this offseason. You're still going to have LeBron and other big stars in free agency. So what if the Clippers lost them, but were able to get Giannis? So it's basically like, if you were thinking this was a short-term thing, you may give Ty Lue maybe a 3-year deal. Where it's like, okay, you get a year, and then let's say the next year, let's say we lose him, let's say we have a bad year or we don't have a great year. Well, we only got a year left and we can let you go. Unless it's just terrible and we have to fire you. 5 years, that shows me that they think even if that potential loss of Kawhi Leonard and Paul George happened, they think maybe he could really help out in keeping the team competitive and keeping the team effective. Really. I really believe that. Because, and so, the Clippers think Ty Lue could be their guy long term to me. And so we're going to have to see how Ty Lue handles the expectations. He's handled it before with LeBron James. He did that for about 3 years, made it to 3 finals. Remember, he took over for David Blatt. Actually, 2 years. He took over for David Blatt, won the chip. Next year, came back. Golden State had formed that new super team, got back to the finals, lost in 5. And then the next year, obviously, we know what happened with that team. Not the best team they've had in Cleveland. Still got back to the finals. So, he has a track record with expectations. So, we'll have to see how Ty Lue does in his new role. And we'll have to see if he can continue to build on that success that he's had going into the future. A team looking to make some moves, potentially this offseason, the Los Angeles Lakers, with a lot of their guys that we forget after winning the championship on 1-year deals. A lot of guys are leaving, opting out, potentially coming back. But there's one guy who's going to opt out and reportedly already has decided to come back as well. Anthony Davis, obviously everybody expected this, is expected to opt out and re-sign with the Lakers. Obviously to get a max deal, big money, big contract. This is a very expected decision. He has absolutely no reason to leave. He just won a championship there. He probably loves it there. And remember something. This is going to be his team when LeBron decides to go. This could be LeBron's last year in Los Angeles. This legitimately could be LeBron's last year in Los Angeles. He also has the ability to become a free agent after this year. So this could be LeBron's last year in Los Angeles. And they've always talked about since Anthony Davis got there. LeBron is kind of mentoring Anthony Davis, getting him ready to have his own team. And this could be the start of that. You know, LeBron could be here for one more year to defend the title. And then be like, you know what, Anthony, I think it's time for you to take the Lakers, take the brand and put it on your shoulders. And so it's something that we'll have to see if Anthony Davis is ready for. LeBron really feels like he's helped Anthony Davis reach that next level. Where even if he's not here, he can still be effective. He can still be great. And the Lakers have big questions on how they're going to configure their team this offseason. Because you also have Rondo opting out and KCP. Dwight Howard is also a free agent. He basically probably the key contributors, the key contributors to the Lakers' championship success are now able to leave. Now, one question I think is going to be interesting is how many players are going to come back. Because I think some of these guys are probably going to sit here and say, hey, I want to defend this championship. Like Rondo, I think the Lakers know they need a guy like Rondo. Also, KCP. He may feel like, hey, I have no reason to leave the Los Angeles Lakers. Dwight's going to have some suitors. Because Dwight showed, hey, if you put Dwight in a certain role, he can thrive in that role at this point in his career and be very effective for you. A team that's been eyeing him is the Golden State Warriors. And I understand why they're doing this, because they look at it and say, okay, what has been Golden State's weakness even through all their prime years? They never really had big men. You could if you had a talented big man, you could drop 30, 40 on Golden State in the paint. That's why they're thinking about trying to bring Dwight Howard in. Because they know, hey, we got Dwight. We got a guy who we can throw at Anthony Davis. We have a guy we can throw at Joker. We have a guy we can throw at all these quality big guys in the Western Conference. And then you got Draymond. If you do keep Draymond, you still got Draymond, who's a good defender in his own right, even though he's a little undersized. A great defender in his own right. And that's why they would do this. Because they've always had a guy, a Parajao, a Bogut, a guy who could defend big men just in case they ever faced a guy who could play, who had a talented big guy. And Dwight shows us he can still move his feet. Great block shots, rebounds, put back dunks. Dwight showed he can do a lot for a team if you put him in the right role and right situation. But we're going to have to see with the Lakers, can they get him back? They still have JaVale McGee. Will they bring JaVale McGee back? And then also, you have to keep this in mind. We've been hearing rumors forever. The Lakers may be looking to add a third star. They could bring all these guys back, potentially to use them as trade bait. And then they're good trade bait because if you think about it, they're on one-year deals if they sign one-year deals again. And so, it's like, well, we'll give you these guys, they're on expiring deals for your guy, to get a third star in there, and then boom. It's a potential. I'm hearing rumors, not really rumors, but I'm hearing a lot of Laker fans through social media talk about people think Kyle Kuzma could be on the move this offseason. That, it's great he won a championship, but with the currently constructed Lakers team, this isn't what's best for him. And he needs to find another team. And so, people are thinking that Kuzma might be on the move this offseason as well. Maybe he'll probably be a big trade piece if they do try to trade for a third star. We can give you a young player that you can develop who has some talent in Kuzma, because that's usually what every team would want, is a young player with talent, and maybe that helps sweeten up the deal potentially for them to be able to get it. But that's all the time we have here for this segment. Coming up next, we're going to get into more NBA news, talk about some Giannis news right here on the podcast.
Check out the show that's built on the MMA, from the UFC to extreme cage fighting. They got the fights covered. Check out the GSMC MMA podcast. Get the latest news on past or upcoming fights. Join us as we talk to and about some of the biggest names in the MMA, past, present, and future. When it's the fight game, there's just one show to check out. GSMCpodcast.com/MMA-podcast. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
Welcome back to the GSMC Basketball Podcast. Last segment, we discussed the Clippers hiring new head coach Ty Lue, honestly promoting head coach Ty Lue. We don't want to say hired, promoting head coach Ty Lue to head coach, bringing in Chauncey Billups as his top assistant, and now will be charged with getting this team with championship expectations to the finals and winning it this year and beating their arch nemesis Lakers, as we still feel like that's an inevitable matchup between the two. And it even has even a more of a storyline, because now it's LeBron James's former head coach that he won a championship with Cleveland, now coaching the team that is supposed to go through them and become the new big brothers of LA. We also discussed the Lakers and having some players potentially opting out, who they retain, who they let go. They have a lot of players on one-year deals now that have expired when the new league year starts, and so we're going to have to see how many people do the Lakers retain, and then are they still in the market to try to get a third star? So that's obviously going to be a question that the Laker fans are going to be wondering about this offseason as they try to get a team together to help defend their championship for next season. I have some Giannis news, but before we get to some Giannis news, I want to talk about something I want to talk about last thing we're out of time. The Dallas Mavericks. Now, they're a team that are also in this wacky race of the Western Conference next year, which the Western Conference just looks so deep next year. Honestly, they look like a very deep conference next year. Obviously, we know about Luka Doncic, probably one of the best players in the NBA already. Top 10 to me currently in the game. You know, he really showed out against the Clippers last year. He really dominated the Clippers last year, really. They couldn't stop him. Young guy, one of the best scorers in the game. Easily could be like Trae Young and average 30 and 10. 6'7" guy, too. So he's bigger than most point guards. They have KP, Kristaps Porzingis. He has had some injury issues, but when he plays, he looked like he was returning to the old Kristaps Porzingis. The guy who could drop 25 a game. And obviously he's a mismatch because he's a 7-footer who can shoot the 3-ball. He's a hard match for any team. And now there's reports saying that the Dallas Mavericks are willing to take on the salary to acquire a third star. And this is big to me because if they're able to acquire a very quality star to go with Luka and Kristaps, we may have to sit here and start discussing the Dallas Mavericks as a championship favorite, depending on who they get. Could they go after a Bradley Beal? Could they go after a Victor Oladipo? Could they go after a Giannis, which I'll have some news on coming up here a little bit in a couple of minutes? Could they go maybe a guy we haven't expected? Could they go after Russell Westbrook? Could they even try to take on a James Harden? We don't know. They are willing to, and they have a lot of pieces. Seth Curry, Vinny Smith, Tim Hardaway. You know, they have guys. Dwight Powell, Barea. They have guys that some teams will look at and think, that's a good piece. That's a good piece. I think we can use him. it's not like they have pieces that nobody wants. They have pieces that some people are like, hey, they can help us. We may have to look into this trade. So if you know your team maybe has a disgruntled star or a guy who may be looking to leave, Dallas could be on that radar. Dallas could be a team that goes in and gets a guy. Maybe Buddy Hield. He's not happy in Sacramento. Maybe they get him. Obviously, depending on how high end the third star is, would probably depend on how far people think they make it. You would feel like at the end of the day, more than likely, they probably won't be able to get a player who is better than Luka unless it's Giannis. If it's not Giannis, he probably won't be better than Luka. Now, he might be better than Kristaps Porzingis, but it just depends on who that player is. But if they do, again, get a third star, that alone just makes them a highly competitive team. You notice a lot during this offseason, a lot of rumors. Teams are trying to acquire stars because they understand it's about to become competitive out west. And so we need to make sure that we're going to have all of our stars and team worked out so we can go against them. And so, listen, the Mavericks are a team to look out for this offseason. Because they're clearly saying, hey, listen, you don't particularly want him on the books anymore. He's maybe a star player, disgruntled star. Team may want to move off of him, maybe want to rebuild, maybe. I don't think they would go after someone like a Chris Paul. I just don't think that would. I don't know how that would work with Chris Paul and Luka since they both need the ball to be effective. But maybe, like I said, the guys I've mentioned, a Bradley Beal, a Victor Oladipo, potentially guys like that, they could be in that running for a guy that you like, hey, we'll take him off your hands. If you don't want him anymore, if Victor Oladipo is truly disgruntled, Dallas is saying, hey, come on. And the Pacers, they like building around, a lot of just good players. You can give them a Seth Curry and maybe a Tim Hardaway Jr. in a pick and get Victor Oladipo back, and then the Pacers just got them two guys they could use, and it's a good trade for everybody. So, Dallas is definitely a team that you need to be looking out for this offseason when it comes to the trade market, because they are clearly looking to acquire somebody and get somebody. But, so, I have news also on Giannis concerning the Mavericks. Brian Windhorst, a respected ESPN reporter, columnist, says that the Mavericks will be at the head of the line for Giannis in 2021. Because they desperately, like I just reported, want a third star. So in what he says they want to keep their books clear in 2021 just in case they want Giannis. Now, the key to this situation is that, I just reported that they want a third star and they're looking to trade for one, but also they might not do anything this offseason and just wait for Giannis to become available next year. In a bigger free agency class, too. Because one thing we have to look at here is it's not even always about, he'll become available next year. There's other going to be great free agents out there, too. Maybe if they can't get a Giannis next year, could they maybe get a Paul George? I mean, that could be something they could do. I feel like what that tells me with that news as well is that Dallas probably would not make that trade for a third star unless they feel like that third star will put them in championship contention. Because you can make an argument them getting Victor Oladipo won't necessarily make them a championship contender. It'll make them obviously more competitive. It'll make them maybe a higher seeded team. But we don't know if that's going to actually be what gets them to be better than every team. But if they added to Giannis, they would have to be the clear favorites. You see what I'm saying? So it probably depends on the type of third star they actually could end up getting to me. I feel like they're going to send fillers out and see, okay, who all could be available? Who all is someone that we think could be a big addition to our team? And then let's see who may be interested in moving a particular player. And then, if we don't like anything, we can just stay quiet. We can stick with the team we have. We feel like our team's a playoff team anyway. We feel like you might even get even better. Have Kristaps Porzingis and stay healthy. Because technically, you can make the argument we haven't seen this team do a whole series in the playoffs with Kristaps Porzingis healthy. Maybe try to see. It's kind of what the Clippers did before they pursued Kawhi. Let's see how good we are without them, and that'll tell us truly if they're going to be the person that gets us over the hump. The Clippers got eliminated in the first round, but think about it. They took the defending chance with Kevin Durant to 6 games. That probably made them feel like if we had Kawhi Leonard, we're winning the series. And so I feel like the Mavericks could do that here. They may sit here and say, hey, depending on how well we do and how far we get, may make us sit here and say, hey, if we add a Giannis, we know we'll be head and shoulders above every other team. Because that is definitely something I think that will be under consideration. I think that is something that they're going to think about. As they should. There's a lot of things that the Mavericks can do. They have flexibility. They can wait a year and let some guys get off the books next year, or they could try to trade them this year. Well, Dallas has a lot of flexibility in the situation. So for me, that's why I wouldn't be surprised if they make a splash this season or make that very aggressive push to get Giannis the next season. So obviously we'll have to see what happens with that. So, also, Miami. Obviously, I talked about previous episode or two ago. A lot of execs are thinking that Miami's becoming the new spot for a lot of stars to want to go to. After seeing them take the Lakers to 6 games with Jimmy Butler as their top player, a lot of stars might look at Miami, look at the organization, look at Pat Riley and how he's ran the organization. A good organization, healthy organization, competitive organization. And a lot of stars might put themselves in that situation with a Jimmy Butler and say, they took the Lakers to 6 games. So what if they had me? Because that's honestly how a lot of people think. The Heat might be a team. If they can get a star with the guys they have, the up-and-coming players like a Bam and a Bio, like a Tyler Hero, all of that, you might see Miami get a star. And obviously, again, they're one of the teams pushing to get Giannis, because if they get Giannis, they will probably be the favorites in the Eastern Conference. If we're being honest here, they will probably be the favorites in the Eastern Conference. I think that would be pretty accurate, or at least close to the favorites. And since all these guys have that playoff experience and that grind now, they're a team that you need to watch out for when it gets to that point. They're a team that really can make some things happen. And so, I definitely think that Miami is going to make a hard push. Dallas is going to make a hard push. Giannis has some guys who are going to make hard pushes at them. I wouldn't be surprised if you try to see players recruiting him during the season, trying to talk to him, if he does not make a commitment, this offseason to the Milwaukee Bucks, you will see a lot of tampering, a lot of players trying to talk to him. You're going to hear all types of conversation because they know their team wants them. And who are they not to try to recruit them? Now, you may have certain players that may feel like they don't need to recruit, but it's definitely something you got to keep an eye on. And it'll be interesting to see where Giannis ends up if he doesn't end up resigning with the Bucks, and now we have a year long of speculation potentially if he doesn't sign that max offer that the Bucks will probably offer him this offseason. But that's all the time we have here for this segment. Coming up next, we're going to get into some more free agency news, offseason news, and head coaching news right here on the GSMC Basketball Podcast. And before you go, don't forget to follow us on Twitter at GSMC_basketball so we can interact about all things basketball. Stay tuned.
Check out the show built around the women of MMA. From the UFC to the extreme cage fighting, we got the fights covered.
Listen.
It's the Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast. The latest news of upcoming fights, discussions of previous matches. Join us as we talk to and about the biggest names in women's mixed martial arts, past, present, and future. When it's the women's fight game, you know where to listen to. The Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast.
Welcome back to the GSMC Basketball Podcast. Last segment we talked about the Dallas Mavericks. They are pursuing a third star. Now, there was one report that said they're looking to trade for one this offseason. But they also had another report saying that they really want Giannis and they're willing to wait till next season and not make any moves this season to acquire him next year. So I basically gave my thoughts on that. I believe they won't make a move this year unless they feel like they can get a player comparable to Giannis as a third guy, or they'll just probably sit on their money, keep the team they have for the most part, and just wait for next year to come around and try to get into the Giannis sweepstakes if he does not sign an extension. Because that's going to be the most interesting thing to me of this entire offseason. If Giannis signs that extension with Milwaukee, what does that do for all these teams who are trying to wait for him? The key is going to be the timing. If Giannis signs this extension before free agency, now teams can plan differently and say, okay, plan B. How are we going to build this team to be competitive next year without Giannis being on the market? Do we still wait for LeBron James, Kawhi Leonard, and Paul George, or do we think we have a legitimate chance, or do we just kind of say, you know what, we're going to try to build the best team we can and go from there? We also talked about the Heat as well being also all in on Giannis, as they have a very strong desire to go and get Giannis and bring him in, which we've known for a while. They want Giannis. They want him. Everybody wants him. They say Golden State won. Clippers even say they might be in the sweepstakes. I mean, literally every team wants Giannis. So when Giannis gets back from this vacation and he actually in the Bucks actually can now officially offer him that deal, it will be interesting to see, will he take the deal? And obviously this is probably going to happen after talks he has with front office, with ownership, to make sure this is a decision that he would want to make moving forward. But now, I have news. News for my Knicks fans. I got news for you. Obviously, your team gets your own little segment, because there's 3 things I like to discuss that are coming from the rumor mill from the Knicks side of things. First rumor. Something that was discussed earlier this offseason. That obviously with Tom Thibodeau and everything, they have a lot of cap space. They're trying to improve this team. They're trying to be competitive. What is one position of upgrade that the Knicks clearly have identified publicly and privately is the position of upgrade on this team? Point guard. So, first, they are obviously going to look into Fred VanVleet. That seems like their number 1 point guard free agency target. They look and see that Kyle VanVleet is probably one of the best playmaking guards in the league that people don't talk about. He was a big clutch shot maker for the Raptors the last couple of years, especially in that finals with Kawhi Leonard. He's a guy who is looking to cash in on all the success he's had. He's a champion. You know, he's competitive. He's a tough player, smart player. And he might fit into that Tom Thibodeau's mold. Not the greatest defender because of his size, but one of the better scorers in the game. And the Knicks need a point guard. And they may look at Fred VanVleet and say, hey, we need you. We need your playmaking. We need your scoring. We need you to here in New York to help us win a championship, potentially. Now, a lot of people may look at this move and think this is the Knicks going to probably overpay for him just to be maybe a decent player there. And then everybody's going to roast the Knicks again for overpaying for Fred VanVleet. But at the same time, this could be a hit for the Knicks. VanVleet could be signed, and then he ends up having a great year for the Knicks. And then everything that everybody was thinking they would have said was the difference. It's the opposite. And so I think that's a move that the Knicks need to look at in terms of free agent. Because out of all the free agent point guards this offseason, Fred VanVleet is probably the best option for them out there if they wanted to go the free agency route with it. Because, again, the Knicks have the cap space to pay him what he's probably looking to be paid. But don't count the Raptors. I'm sure the Raptors would like to bring him back, especially with rumors that Serge Ibaka may be on his way out after removing all of the Raptors-related content from his social media pages. Obviously, that always starts a stir. So I'm sure they would like to keep one of them, not lose both, because of how key they are to their team and how key of contributors they've been for the last few years for this franchise. If you're talking the trade route with the Knicks, a player that has been spotlighted, the Knicks have been reportedly be willing to kick around to see about a trade for Russell Westbrook. You heard it here. You heard it here, folks. Russell Westbrook. You don't have to clean your ear out. I said Russell Westbrook. Now, this trade is going to probably be very highly polarizing. I'm sure a lot of Knicks fans are going to sit here and say, why in the blue, whatchamacallit, would we trade for Russell Westbrook? What are we giving up for this man, first of all? Because in terms of his personality, in terms of box office, in terms of ticket selling, in terms of all that, Russell Westbrook's perfect for New York. Absolutely perfect. I think that would be great. But if you're talking about on the court, I don't know. It'll be great for Russell because Russell could go back to Oklahoma City Russell after KD. Triple doubles every night, 30-point nights, doing it his way because he's going to be the best player on the team. So, who going to tell him different? And honestly, he kind of fits that Tom Thibodeau player mold of what kind of players he likes on his team. So it's not necessarily a bad fit from a coach to player perspective. It's just we see Russell's flaws in his game and how he can hinder a team. He is great for box office. He is great to sell tickets, to get people to come to Madison Square Garden. But I don't know if it's the best basketball decision because of the type of way he plays the game. And so if the Knicks are just looking for that box office appeal, I'd say go right ahead. If we said we need somebody to sell tickets, get us a guy who sells tickets that's a star. Russell Westbrook will be on top of my list. If you're telling me, go get me a guy who plays good team basketball, high IQ, and is a great player for championships, we can't say Russell Westbrook. There is no evidence to say Russell Westbrook. And especially, again, with this Knicks team, unless they get a second star, he'll be the one star on the team. We may see triple-double Russ more often, but maybe that gets the Knicks to the playoffs. We don't know. The Eastern Conference at the bottom could be bad again, so that could potentially happen, but I don't know if you're a Knicks fan and you particularly want that. So it's just something to keep an eye on. And then obviously if they went the draft route, obviously we all know the Knicks did not get a great draft pick in the lottery. They were clearly roasted for it on Twitter and just destroyed. The Knicks still are holding out hope they can potentially trade into the top 3. And everybody pretty much believes if they were able to trade it into the top 3, their prospect that they probably go and draft would be LaMelo Ball. Because he is the top point guard available in this draft class and one of the 3 best, as they say, star potential players in the draft of Anthony Edwards and James Wiseman. Because we've already talked about before, they're already not looking. They don't really like the other point guard candidates. They've even ruled out Anthony from North Carolina. So if they can't get LaMelo Ball from the drafting standpoint, they may be willing to sell some draft stock, trade back, and just say, we'll figure it out. The draft comes before free agency. So clearly, if they don't take a point guard in the draft, then clearly they're going all in free agency or trade to get a point guard. If they take a point guard in the draft, then maybe they won't. They could still do it. You got RJ Barrett, you got Robinson, you got those two guys. You can build around them. You got some other pieces on the team. But you need that point guard. And so that's going to be the interesting situation if they can potentially make that move. And then another guy who could be on the move, and the current point guard, so to say, of the Knicks is Dennis Smith Jr. Dennis Smith Jr., I think we all forget what Dennis Smith Jr. was when he entered the league. Y'all do realize he was in the Rookie of the Year discussion at the end of his rookie year. He was the star point guard for Dallas. He was out here balling. And then they still went and drafted Luka Doncic, which now is a better star than him. And then now we're looking at Dennis Smith Jr. like he can't play, and he's a decent player. When literally we've seen him his rookie year average literally 18 to 20 points a game. He can score. But obviously with the Knicks trying to make an upgrade at point guard, they're probably maybe looking and open to trade offers for Dennis Smith Jr. One team to look out for, if you're a Knicks fan and maybe somebody wants to take that guy off your hands, the Orlando Magic might be looking to acquire Dennis Smith Jr. So it'll be interesting if you were able to make a trade with them. What would they give back? Maybe could you get Isaacs potentially for him? Could you get Evan Fournier? Maybe you get a shooter in there. Maybe I don't think they'll give up Fultz. Maybe Michael Carter Williams. Maybe even a Mo Bamba. I mean, they might say, hey, we'll give you Mo Bamba. We'll give you Fournier for Dennis Smith Jr. That's potentially a potential deal for the Knicks. So, because it doesn't look like Dennis Smith Jr. is going to be there. When he ended the season last year, it wasn't the greatest ending to his season with the Knicks. We don't know yet how the brass and Tom Thibodeau and Leon Rose and all of them feel about Dennis Smith Jr. yet to that extent. We think they're going to maybe try to see if they can move him, but we don't have an official clear perspective on that yet. So we'll have to see if maybe he gets moved around draft night. That might be a night to look and see if Dennis Smith Jr. is potentially going to be moved. But that's pretty much, in terms of Knicks news, all I have for you Knicks fans. So clearly you're going to play for three guys, all from the free agency option, which is Kyle Van Fleet, the trade option, which is Russell Westbrook, and the draft option, which y'all would hope if you were able to somehow trade into the top three would be LaMelo Ball. And if you're looking for someone that you think you might move off the team, Dennis Smith Jr. is a guy to definitely keep an eye on as a potential guy that y'all could move from the team. So I want to get to some last quick news before we get out of here. The Van Gundy brothers both have interviews. Jeff Van Gundy, commentator for ESPN ABC for many years, top commentating team with Mark Jackson, Mike Breen, is reportedly interviewing for the Houston job. So it'll be interesting now with the Daryl Morey stepping down. Would he potentially become head coach and general manager as well? Is that something that is brought up to him in those meetings? He's been in discussion for some head coaching vacancies, and now that he's getting his interview with Houston, it'll be interesting to see how he would go about that and how he would, formulate that team if he was able to get that job. Because you always can hear it from that commentating aspect of what he would do. But now see what would happen if he became a head coach. And then also, Stan Van Gundy, formerly head coach of the Pistons Rast, is getting an interview with the Pelicans. So the Pelicans are interviewing Stan Van Gundy. He is someone they look at highly, potentially could be there. He's still able to get jobs in the league. The Van Gundy brothers clearly could maybe both be in the league for the first time. And I don't know, have they ever been in the league all together? I might have to check on that. But they clearly are busy as a family, the brothers, getting interviews with jobs, trying to see if maybe both or one of them could become a head coach in the league again. So I'm sure that's a very exciting time for both of them as well. But that's all the time we have here today on the podcast. Thank you for tuning into the GSMC Basketball Podcast. Once again, I am your host, Brice Lewis. Don't forget to follow us on Twitter at GSMC_basketball. Also, don't forget wherever platform you're listening to us on, rate, review. We'd love to hear your feedback and appreciate any type of commentary, comments, anything. We love it all here at GSMC. Also, don't forget to listen to our other basic GSMC podcasts here on the network. This is your host, Brice, signing out, saying, have a good day.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Basketball Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.